All right, this meeting is now being recorded.
All right. I'll call us to order and then Brown, are you going to take attendance for us?
Jim Frace. Tommy Sapernick. Here. Ben Chambers.
Here.
Roland Stolzenberg.
Here.
Jessica Hirsch-Bowling.
Should be here soon.
Albert Karina Plum.
Here.
Luis Carzana.
Here.
Charles Proctor.
I believe he's online.
Can you hear us, Chuck?
What do you guys?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry about that. The screen was covered up, so I couldn't get to the screen to turn it on. All right.
For,
Yeah.
joining virtually.
Could you please provide a reason and for joining virtually and a location?
I'm out of Warrenton residency, and I'm definitely more than 60 miles away. Sandy's my voting counterpart for the meeting, and she's present.
Thank you. Sarah Simba. Jason Espy. Bill Palmer.
Here.
Wood Hudson.
I'm Mitch Huber. I'm attending on Wood's behalf from DRPT.
Could you provide a reason for virtual attendance and a location, please?
Sure, I'm based in Richmond, so I guess I exceed that 60-mile radius.
Thank you. Sarah Pennington. Garland Williams.
We've got a lot of people in attendance here today. Next up is matters from the public. Do you have anything from the public? Oh, not like that. All right, would you mind taking the voting, please? Thank you, Ben. And you have up to 3 minutes.
My name is Bill Emery. I live in the Willow Mills at 1604 East Market Street in the city of Charlottesville. I've been corresponding a bit with Ben and Sarah about the FFC. Since 1988, the Willow Mills neighborhood has corresponded with Charlottesville city councilors regarding traffic calming in the neighborhood. And so we were somewhat caught unawares by the request to reclassify Market Street and Chesapeake Street as minor collectors. We are hoping to get more information regarding the reclassification. There are a lot of great links in the August 28th agenda for the policy board. But in addition, we'd like to get a map of city streets with planning, with an overlay of planning districts, the 19 planning districts, which would reflect not just the streets that are requested to be reclassified, but the federal classification of all the streets in the city by color code. And also we'd like to see a copy of the form that transportation planner Mr. Chambers submitted to the MPO. We're a little bit alarmed and concerned just because the normal collaboration that we're used to having with the city, say for instance, when the Streets at Work program was done 10 years ago, has been totally absent, and we just are surprised and want to be reassured of all the potential consequences of being reclassified. So, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Krebs from the Piedmont Environmental Council. This is just a thing that I'd like to make sure is on the radar of the planners that are in this room. The Venn diagram representing UVA, city, county, VDOT, MPO potentially, but so we were making a lot of good progress on bike pedestrian projects of city county interest for a long time. And then I want to say about 3 years ago, progress has really sort of stopped on a number of projects that are pretty high priority for both localities. And it's the same situation we had before the bike ped plan, where it's like kind of a hot potato, city county who's going to do these projects. The 4 of them come to mind that are pretty high priority that we do need to get moving on in some kind of way. So and people ask me about these all the time, and I can kind of just say this: I don't know where they are. And I hope it's not because the answer is they're nowhere, but I suspect that might be the case actually. So we have the Ravenna River pedestrian bridge. We have the Route 20 shared use path. We have a potential tunnel at Greenbrier Park and the John Werner Parkway. And we have a fairly new project, which is Morris Creek Greenway between 5th Street and Old Lynchburg Road. So it sort of seems to me that when Smart Scale made it hard to do bike ped, we as a community had the attitude, well, we'll use Smart Scale for that type of stuff. And then Smart Scale went away for that for a while. And so there's just not a plan B. Maybe Smart Scale will be good for that again in the future, but we need to find other ways. And so I would like to just ask that the community as a whole, the transportation planning community as a whole, not lose track of bike ped projects, and especially not lose track of the city-county border area where stuff is really languishing. And one example of a project that you are doing, which is on the city-county line, very auto-centric, but it has a bike ped component too, which is Barracks Road. Now, the projects I named are pretty expensive, but from what I've seen, the sum of those 4 projects is comparable to just the cost of Barracks Road. So let's not lose track of ways that we can work together and benefit together and maybe be a bit creative in solving those problems. Thank you.
First, acceptance of the agenda. I'd like to have a motion to accept the and the second.
Second.
Thank you. And all who support say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. We have an agenda. Also ask for a motion to move the meeting minutes from August 20. Approving those. All right, and a second. Second. Thank you. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I have to abstain.
Perfect. One abstention. All right, moving right along to new business. First, Corian, can you catch us up on what's going on with the federal functional classification?
Yes, so included in the agenda for a federal functional classification are the proposed revisions, the staff memo, and the resolution of support, the revised version. The discussion was that the Virginia Department of Transportation coordinated with MPOs across the state to review and update the federal functional classification. In May, the Charlottesville Albemarle MPO introduced the update to local staff and boards, allowing stakeholders to provide feedback until June 17th. VDOT reviewed the revisions, and by August, the MPO recommended deferring a decisions due to the unavailability of a revised draft map. By October, VDOT responded to the requested changes, incorporating most local recommendations. The Charlottesville Albemarle MPO is not considering final approval of the updated FFC map, which will then be submitted to the Federal Highway Administration for review and finalization of the map. Charlottesville Albemarle MPO staff recommends that the technical committee moves to recommend that the policy board adopt a resolution to approve the proposed updates to the highway system functional classifications presented in the summary map.
All right, so. From us, we're looking for a resolution of support that we're sending to the policy board. During discussion on this, for a motion.
I think maybe for the benefit of the public, can we have some conversation on the consequences of changing functional classification?
Sure. The functional classification is the process by which streets and highways are grouped into classes or systems. According to the character of service they are intended to provide. Basically, this process is the recognition that individual roads and streets do not serve travel independently in a major way, but serve as a part of an overall network. Most travel involves movement through the network of roadways. It becomes necessary to determine how this travel can be channelized within the network in a logical and efficient manner. Functional classification defines the nature of this channelization process by defining the part that any particular road or street should play in serving a flow of trips through a highway network. VDOT, Transportation and Mobility Planning Division, is responsible for maintaining the Commonwealth's official federal functional classification system. TMPD determines the functional federal classification of the road by type of trips, expected volume, what systems the roadways connect, whether the proposed functional classification falls within the mileage percentage thresholds established by the FHWA.
Okay, so is this telling us that we are reporting to them how our streets are currently functioning and how we expect them to continue functioning?
Yes.
Okay. And does that mean that they can now turn around and say that we have to maintain it in a certain way or build it in a certain way or change anything to it that is different than what our city standards say?
No.
Okay. So do we get funding for this?
I think we'll have a discussion when we submit, and that's what was his question, we have to see the form, but there's a process, right, to get to where we are. We fill the form, discuss with the MPO, MPO submitted to VDOT, VDOT reviewed, came back to us, and then to VDOT central office, back from central office, here we are with the final map. I don't know if Sandy or anyone has something to pitch in there. We could circle back, but there's a loop that went around.
Right.
Yeah, there is a federal funding formula or a funding formula that VDOT uses that is partially based on the functional classification system. I don't know specifically how those impacts are, but it could have to do with how much funding we receive.
And that's for things like money that we get for paving.
Yeah.
Kind of maintenance stuff of, hey, we're saying this is how these are basically working now, so you make sure that they are being maintained appropriately with federal dollars.
Correct, there's a maintenance fund that is allocated to the county.
Okay. And
Right. Specifically, arterials get higher payments per lane mile,
Right.
locals and collectors get the same amount.
Gotcha.
So from the city's perspective, these changes only give us more funding with respect to sharing.
Okay.
And depending on how Preston works, since one side is already. It's one of those where with this divided road, we're adding the other side.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're just adding some lane. Okay. I don't, the county had a few changes as well, but they're more in scope.
Yeah, I double checked that all of our changes are reflected in the final map, but one question I do have was Mill Creek Drive. I think that it was actually the city who suggested it would change, and it's not reflected the way it was communicated to us. It looks like Charlottesville staff requested to change the classification from local road to major collector. But in the map, it's listed as a minor collector.
That might have been from each other.
Mill Creek Drive,
Mill Creek.
yeah, between Avon and 20.
That was based on TMPD review of it, so it was sent to TMPD with that request and they came back and granted it member.
Great, does everyone at the city feel good about that? I think the county feels good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Why did the city recommend the change?
Because it wasn't shown as anything except a local way, and it seemed like a pretty important connection between two, I think they're arterials.
Sure. So I think the other question I had, in 2021, in the county, we had already reclassified a lot of these things, Avon and 53 and some others, other entrance corridors, since only arterials can be entrance corridors by statute, and they were violating statute. But they're reflected here as changes. Is that just because in the previous 2010 one, this is changed from then rather than the current change?
I don't totally know what happened, but we did identify those as not being properly reflected in the first version of the map, and now they're where they're supposed to be.
Okay. And then lastly, on hydraulic in the shape file, it doesn't look like the roundabout.
I don't know if that changes the classification of the road.
No, just the shape and number of lane miles.
And just as a quick housekeeping thing, this room, I know it's very quiet in here, but if everyone could speak up so folks online can hear, that would be very helpful.
And not just those online, I'm actually having a hard time hearing you. So, and I'm right here, so if everybody could just bring it up a notch, that would be terrific.
Maybe a little bit more.
Be a little bit more obnoxious, that'd be great.
All right. Any more questions on federal functional classification? All right, now I have a motion from someone to support the resolution of support for the federal functional classification revisions. So moved. One.
Second that.
All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
I do.
You have an abstention. Cool. All right, next up, we have VDOT project updates. Sandy or Chuck? I'm not sure who's taking the realm.
Yeah, I think Chuck is gonna at least lead off.
Yeah, that's gonna be me. Basically, we developed some, based on your questions, we came back and put together some presentations. One on Fifth Street, one on the future pipeline and stars preliminary study locations, and the third one was the Ivy Road update. So I'm gonna share my screen, maybe. and present that material. Give me a second here. Okay. I've gotten used to hearing post now. All right. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, this is the Fifth Street corridor. This was the application for Smart Scale this round. We have completed all our work on getting it together and validating it, and we're just waiting for it to go through the scoring process. There were some questions came up about the cost estimate and why we didn't look at additional alternatives, and I'm just going to go through some of that. Basically, this is the project development process that we typically go through on a project. We do an application overview, the process, the constraints, develop a list of alternatives. We develop some high-level cost estimates, and then the timeline for the application and the next steps. Basically, this is the process we typically go through. We assess the existing conditions, identify the alternatives, then we evaluate all the alternatives, and we select a preferred alternative for a project, and then we go through and finalize the concept, and we develop a base cost estimate and the application material. As part of that process, towards the end of it, we also look at the risk and contingency as part of the development of the final cost estimate. And I think that's where a lot of the questions are that have been raised about the process. This is the overall sort of all the people that are involved and how we develop it in it. It's compressed schedule. For this particular project, we didn't really identify it as a submitted project to work forward with until like late fall of last year. So that gave us 6 to 8 months to do this whole process, which is really constrained, compressed for an interchange. We had done a previous study of the corridor, Fifth Street corridor study, where we had a preliminary high level alternative recommendation for DDI, but we hadn't really done anything else regarding that. So what we had to do with this study is basically flush that out. So we basically looked at it as a new study from that perspective, and looked at various alternatives that we had somewhat recommended from the previous study, and developed an alternative analysis. We reached out to get public feedback and identified what the preferred scenario is. And that took several months in the early part of this year, where we were able to get consensus around the preferred alternative, which was the divergent diamond. Part of the reason we felt that was the best solution is cost up, because it's typically you don't have to do full bridge replacement. And we didn't find that out until later in the process. But basically, once you do that, we had a consultant, Baker, that we brought on board to do the work for us, and worked with L&D and us and traffic engineering to go through and develop the alternative, the interchange justification report, which is part of the process we have to go through now for Smart Scale, which adds a lot of complexity to the process, because it's a lot more detailed analysis work. So that took a little bit more time to do that, but we were able to meet the deadlines for the preliminary application for the preferred alternative. We just hadn't done a lot of the later analysis and the cost estimate and any of that, all that stuff, which basically started in, we're working on it, but we really didn't get to it till later in the process, which is June and July. May, June, and July is when we actually started to really get details into that part of the process. Basically, as part of the process, we developed the crash analysis. We identified the goals, and these are the alternatives that we ended up pursuing. Moving forward, as several of them were existing conditions plus sidewalk, optimized diamond, were some of the short-term solutions that were identified in the larger corridor study that we'd done previously. The divergent diamond was the recommended at that time, and then we actually looked at a SPUI too because of the right-of-way impacts. We felt that would be the better fit for the location if we looked at an alternative interchange treatment. As part of the evaluation, we basically did a VJust analysis, and we looked at the crash modification factors and the relative costs. As you can see here, the 0.74 for the DDI it's not the best, which would be the SPUI, but it's definitely not, it's better than the existing conditions. For the crash modification factor, 0.73, that's the best you're going to get out of all of them. The 0.12 for the sidewalk only is really just focused on the pedestrian crashes, not the operation analysis for the other crashes that occur at the interchange. So that's why it shows up as better, but it's only looking at pedestrian and bicyclist crashes, which is a very small number of crashes at the intersection. And then we looked at relative cost as a comparison of the three. And like I said, it's cheaper to do the divergent diamond than it is to SPUI, but it's definitely more expensive than optimizing the diamond or just adding sidewalk improvements. Sorry about the noise in the background. Basically, so here's an overview of the different scenarios and the ins and outs of them. The biggest thing is we did get a lot of feedback from the public, and they were mainly focused on the divergent diamond because it provided the most benefits of the alternatives for the least amount of cost per se. So this is the alternative that we ended up submitting for the application. And like I said, we had a lot of favorable public feedback, and it did meet all of the requirements of the scope of the project, providing a shared use path across through the corridor, and actually address some of the safety issues at the intersections and the interchange. The cost estimate. This is where flags started coming up for everybody. Basically, we saw the 79 million cost estimate. It was significantly greater. When we get into the details of it, because of the structure itself, the entire bridge deck had to be replaced to accommodate the additional loads and structural work we had to do to the deck to put the shared use path across the middle. And when they started looking at that part of it and integrated into the substructure, they felt that the substructure would have to be replaced as well. And we didn't find this out until very late in the process, and it didn't really give us enough time to go back and consider any other alternatives because we were like in June and July at this point where we're trying to finalize the application. And basically here's a timeline of why we went to where we did. Like I said, this July through August timeframe is when we really identified when the entire bridge would have to be replaced because that was a recommendation we got from the bridge section, and it didn't come in until late in the process. And then we got the final estimate from L&D for the application, but they actually didn't submit the actual final estimate until late August. And we had to adjust the cost of the application to reflect it. And currently, I think L&D just got comments from central office on the cost estimate that they're trying to address. So with Barracks Road, I know we had to go in and actually make some additional changes because we had forgotten to include the removal of the sound wall in the estimate. So we made some modifications and had to change the estimate last couple of weeks ago to its final version. This is just a comparison slide we put in there. We felt it might be advantageous to look at it. The comparison between last round and this round. And you can see that for the HPP projects with there's a reduction because of the limited number of eligible projects that the regional bodies can submit. And that was the biggest change. The other thing is by eliminating the land use factor, it's going to increase the cost of most projects. The combination of the two definitely is going to in cost. And you can see that reflected in these tables. Significantly, the HPP and the less than $20 million and 71% less than $20 million. That's a big change. And then some more information about more of the local projects that we submitted last round, comparison between the two. 50% were less than $20 million. And now 100% were more than $20 million. So basically we didn't submit any applications less than $20 million for the high priority system because of the eligibility changes to the process. But you can see between the average cost of all the projects, how it went up. And that's significant. Part of it's got to do with inflation. As the biggest part of it, because we look at the unit prices for the bid from the bid tabs from the contractors when we're developing those, as well as all the factors that go into it from the PE standpoint that we have to replace from to address the safety and the operational needs. I think that's it. Let's see, 2 more slides. Basically, the next steps, we're going to wait till we get the scoring and the rankings, which will come out in January and present it at the CTB meeting. And then after that, we will go and possibly relook at it. We can talk about it when we get to the study slides. One of my suggestions would be to reevaluate the interchange with a shared use path on a separate structure next to it to see if that can dramatically increase or decrease the cost of the project and make it more competitive. We're not sure how it's going to compete this round with the changes they made to Smart Scale, but we'll just wait and see. But we are planning to relook at it again as a pipeline study for next round. That's going to be starting here in the next couple of months. Any questions about that?
I have some questions, Chuck. Sorry if you've already talked about this at a previous meeting. I wasn't here in August, but what, given the need to completely rebuild the bridge deck, if we were gonna put a shared use path on it, how healthy is this bridge and would it, be eligible for state of good repair fund? What is that process for, potentially using SGR funds to offset the cost of a Smart Scale project?
Not something we can do as part of Smart Scale. IID doesn't let us commingle those types of funds. It's not at a point where it's at the point where we're going to rebuild it, but it's not very far away from it. I think it's rated 6 out of 10 right now overall. So once it gets below 6, we'll have to put it on the list of projects to actually look at refixing. And it just depends on what the fix is. It could be that we're just going to basically resurface the deck, which not replace the deck, basically mill and latex overlay the deck. It just depends on what we can do with SGR. May not be necessarily what we would do with a project. Because we're having to redo the put barrier and redo the entire surface of the deck, we had to replace the entire deck because you have to put barrier on both sides of the shared use path. And the way the bridge is built, it's got a joint in the middle that runs longitudinally along the bridge the entire length and it's not necessarily straight. So we're having to figure out how to do that. So basically, and the other thing is because that's scuppers that are in the travel lanes outside of the sidewalk along on both sides of the bridge. So those are all have to be replaced. And when we started looking at some of that, integrating the barrier, we had to replace the whole deck. So that was the first thing. And then once they looked at replacing the whole deck, because the substructure was also rated at 6, they basically felt that if they went ahead and redid a new bridge, we would end up having to, it wouldn't necessarily work with the current substructure. So that's what they basically said, we'll have to replace the substructure. But we didn't find that out until really late in the process to where we couldn't really go back and make any changes. But to your question, SJR, they don't let us commingle those type of funds. And then what we would do for SJR may not address what our needs are for the project. Because they're going to want to replace in kind with that funding, and replace in kind wouldn't allow us to modify the structure like we need to do to accommodate the shared use path and the divergent diamond.
So, Chuck, if the bridge does have to be, or the deck has to be replaced, would that cost come out of the smart scale price?
Do what now? I didn't hear the question.
If as the project, the bridge deck or bridge has to be replaced, and it can't be used by SDR funds, you can't commingle them, would the cost for replacing the deck come out of the smart scale project cost? With that,
Our project, that $79 million includes full bridge replacement.
So, you may have said this already, Chuck, but, what number were we looking at if we didn't have to replace the deck?
We pulled some of the numbers. Sandy went through the cost estimate and it was like around $20 million for the bridge. And that's out of the existing funding. Uninflated costs, and I think it was 59 million uninflated, so it'd be about $40 million.
Yeah, the bridge specific items were about half of the cost, but that would also incorporate like the replacement of the deck. So not all of those costs would necessarily have been removed because you would still have to do improvements to the deck.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to L&D about it. If we can move the shared use path somewhere else, the amount of improvements we'd have to make would be just very minimal to the bridge deck. Because you're talking about where the center island runs across for the left turn lanes. We might have to take out some of that and reconfigure some of that sidewalk or curbing and median, but that's about it. Everything else could stay the same. We wouldn't have to touch anything else. There's a lot of other items, especially for the radiuses of those ramps to work, that are going to require retaining walls. So a lot of that's factored into the cost of the project, and you're going to have that regardless of whether the shared use path is there or not. But I think that if we don't have to replace the entire bridge and can just do some minor modifications to the deck by having that median island reconfiguration, we don't have to put a barrier in there. I mean, we don't have to integrate anything into the deck. It should be minimal cost for that bridge, for the project. So I'm thinking that it should be substantially less to put a bike ped bridge adjacent to it to get the pedestrians across that same corridor. And that's what we're going to try to do as a follow-up study moving forward in pipeline, so we'll have it ready for next round of smart scale.
We'll look forward to that design. Any other questions on this one?
Just a clarification. So if we don't make the improvements to the subsurface, and you mentioned that it's already at 6. So if you make these improvements, is that bringing it up from a 6? Or are you still in a substandard condition? And
Not that it's substandard, it's just that it's going to have to get some repair work done to it. Whether it's, like I said, you could mill and overlay it, there could be some sandblasting and fixing some, whatever's wrong with the substructure currently, but we wouldn't necessarily do a full bridge replacement if we have to do something to it in the future.
That would, okay. So you wouldn't do that before the smart scale?
We could do it as part of, we could coordinate it because of the timeframes. It could be that they could do the mill and overlay as part of the median improvements, separate from the project, as a maintenance portion of the project. The problem is we can't really do the median work because it's still got to operate until we do the divergent diamond reconfiguration, which we can't do with the project.
So, can I try to, summarize in my head what was just said? The project got substantially more expensive because the need to replace the deck of the bridge. The project included a shared use path, but if we remove the shared use path from this project, you could get away with not doing a full redecking and therefore lower the cost of the project. And then you would look at potentially adding some sort of bike ped bridge parallel to this current traffic bridge, funding from which we don't know where it would come from. And I'm curious, again, because I'm new to this process, removing the shared use path, does that change, like, smart scale the points that were awarded for this project?
Typically gets the shared use path points would come out of land use. And I'm not saying we would remove it. We just wouldn't include it as on the bridge itself. We would include a separate structure next to the bridge with the project for just the shared use path. The other thing is I was going into this, I felt that we would have to do the deck replacement regardless. It's just, I wasn't planning on doing a full bridge replacement, which includes the piers that hold up the bridge deck. They're saying we've got to replace the whole thing. And that's where the rub comes in. I wasn't expecting to have to replace the entire bridge because we could have looked at a totally different type of bridge at that point. And my thoughts is that's too expensive. So the deck replacement, I felt that was something that we may end up having to do anyway, initially. But I felt that was cheaper than a full bridge replacement. And that's where the difference is. It's not that the deck replacement drove the cost, that's expensive. It's rebuilding the entire substructure is what I wasn't expecting to have to do.
So the bridge has to get replaced, but it's still more cost effective to replace the bridge, not add a shared use path in the middle, and to have a separate shared use path bridge to the side.
Wait,
We wouldn't replace the bridge.
can I try?
Yeah,
No. The new project would not include the deck replacement at all. It would just be putting a bridge on adjacent to the existing structure for bike and pedestrians. And it would do some minor modifications to the median on the bridge to accommodate the divergent diamond.
Let me try, and maybe I'm the only one getting confused on this part, but I'm thinking about next steps and actions that this committee needs to take. So what you're saying is that our application for this round of smart scale has already been submitted. It is an expensive project that would replace the entire bridge, but still get us all of the features that we included in the application if it were to be awarded. It's really going to be awarded. So now we're already thinking about the next round of smart scale. In the next round of smart scale, we don't know yet, but it sounds like your professional opinion is that it might be cheaper overall to separate the shared use path from the existing bridge, make minimal improvements to the bridge itself, build an additional structure, still get all of the pieces that the group wants, hopefully cheaper in the future, in a future round. We're just talking about potential future steps.
Correct. I mean, part of the issue with this, it's an interchange. So there's a study process that we have to go through called an IAR, which we have to get buy-in from the feds and central office, and all these folks have to buy into the alternatives. We didn't consider that as an alternative. However, even if this project is funded, when they start doing the design work, they'll go in and do some value engineering, and they may look at that and come up with that solution as a valued engineering alternative to the current project. So we might still end up there anyway, even if it is funded this round, we may end up there in the end. I'm just saying at $79 million, I don't think it's competitive enough to get funded. So I'm already planning to relook at it for next round. Still provide all the same features and amenities that we want. It'll just be on a separate structure, and hopefully we can get it at a lesser cost. Because typically around the $20 million range last round was the optimal cost for projects to get funded. We've got most of our projects are more than $20 million. So it's going to be, that number is going to change, but I don't know what it is yet because I don't have any data to base any kind of estimates on what we could expect that number to be in the future. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I feel more clear. So there's nothing really for us to do. It's just, the bummer of news. Yeah.
Like I said, if we had a little bit more time, we're trying to do that. That's why we're looking at starting pipeline right now. We're starting our STAR studies, which we're going to be talking about those in a later presentation right now, so that by the time we get there, we've got a lot of, we have more time to actually look at other alternatives that we may not have been able to consider when we were looking at that in that compressed schedule.
One other question, bigger picture, and I think I'm making a request for information if the rest of the committee agrees for this. You showed one slide, Chuck, that had comparative costs for projects from round 5 versus round 6 for the Culpeper district. Is it possible to get more information comparing round 5 and round 6 costs for similar-ish projects from different districts? I think that's just a bigger picture question we're curious about. I know there's a ton of variables for every project, but maybe there's something we can compare to see if our project costs look like the project costs from other districts. If that's
Data, hopefully we can look at the data. Sandy pulled this slide together, so we had some data available, but all the data is not available yet. The more time we spend finalizing getting the final cost estimates, the more accurate we can get with this data. But we can work on that and provide you some information on that later.
Thank you. All right, now we want to move on to Ivy Corridor, I think.
All right, just give me a second here. Where's my slides? All right, see the new slides?
Yep.
All right. Hopefully this will go pretty quick. Basically, we've got the proposed scenario planning and some recommended strategies for the corridor. Basically, and went through this whole thing and what we finally agreed to with the county and UVA and the community is basically this group of projects would be the recommended solution. It includes the roundabouts at Boar's Head and a roundabout at Canterbury, and a median between the two roundabouts. So you would close off those access, not close the access points off, but close off them to full access. It also included previously studied the roundabout or triangle about for that quadrant on Old Ivy Road, It includes the ramp improvements on 250 bypass north of the Old Ivy Road interchange. Those on and off ramps, extending them. The northbound would extend all the way in Leonard Sandridge, and the southbound would just be extended back about halfway to Leonard Sandridge, so that they would not create a queuing issue and allow for that. Because a lot of people that want to go to Leonard Sandridge, they'll come down and use those ramps to go to Leonard Sandridge, as opposed to going through the city to get there. So we felt that that was a way to handle that, and it would lessen the merge weave issue that we've currently got on that northbound side in the morning. And then would accommodate, there'd be a shared use path along Old Ivy Road, as well as some improvements at the underpass on the east side, railroad underpass. And typically we're going to reduce it down to a 1-lane underpass and provide pedestrian and bike facilities along the east side of the underpass. And then basically we'll provide still, right now we're looking at 2-way traffic with signals. We'll see if that's going to work when we get to that point, if it's funded. And we're going to remove that west or eastbound left turn lane movement. So that's the group. And then the A, B, and C are how we group those projects for smart scale applications. We felt that the triangle about and the shared use path would be something that possibly would be locally funded as opposed to part of a smart scale application. The ramps would be a project, and that could be something that the MPO could submit. And the roundabout and the shared use, the median closure could be an application that the county could submit, or the MPO could submit both those projects together. So that's basically the preferred scenario. We also have any questions about that? Because I know this is the crux to what most of the people had concerns about.
I got questions. I just don't know if we want to go through the rest of the slides first.
Well, I'm just saying if we can come back, the
Yeah.
other slides are just on the more longer terms. They're not preferred scenarios, but they're recommended things. They're the locality recommend in the future as the needs arise on those locations. And that's basically the western section and the eastern section. But we can go through those real quick and come back to the slide. So the western end, basically you have various alternatives in the western package 1. And these are like I said, these are stuff that the county could consider in the future if they start to see issues along this corridor at these various locations. And this is west of Boar's Head. But includes parallel roads, some intersection improvements, roundabouts, various, but something that they might want to consider. And then you have the same thing for the middle section. We have the long-term improvements, which is basically eventually if we have issues on Barracks Road or the bypass, from a capacity standpoint, we may have to look at expanding this roadway. Or if we have further issues with the interchange. And that basically would rebuilding the interchange altogether. The ramps would also redo the bridges, the railroad underpasses at both ends to accommodate double tracking, so we could basically do the work on that part of it. Because the bridge over the bypass is integrated, where the railroad bridge is integrated into the roadway bridge. So they're on the same structure. So we'd have to replace both of those if we wanted to expand those, lengthen those bridges to accommodate any future expansion of the bypass. And then, like I said, we'd also replace the bridge over on Old Ivy Road. And then the eastern end, again, these are more long-term suggestions that the county could consider for these various intersections between the interchange and Old Ivy Road. And basically this is where we're at. we're reviewing the final report and we're developing some planning level cost estimates for the preferred scenarios. Now, these aren't going to be necessarily the final cost estimates for like an application, but they'll be more higher level. We'll have to go through, if these are something that the locality wants to submit, we'll have to go through and do some more work on those, but it'll give you an idea what the costs are going to be. Okay, that's pretty much it for that. Any questions?
What's the time frame for your next steps? Is this what we're talking about at our December meeting, or is this something we'll be thinking more about in 2025?
Well, we can start, the earlier we start, the better. I know for even the ramps, we'll have to go through some sort of OZAR type of study, similar to what we did for Barracks Road, and that's going to take a little bit of time to do. So the sooner we can start on that, the better. We'll just have to coordinate with the localities and the MPO on what do they see their applications will be for the next round of smart scale. Now it's whether we start on them now or whether we wait till we see how everything plays out. Like for Fifth Street, I'm already looking at doing it as a pipeline study coming up, combining it with the Fifth Street Station intersection so we can relook at that corridor since the city's looking at doing something different on their portion of it north of there. I felt that we could do that as a study and integrate what they want to do with what we were proposing to do and what we want to do with the interchange.
I noticed that the map you had in the presentation was a little bit older. We had a newer map we presented to LUPEC back in August. I just sent you the email for that attachment, if you don't mind bringing that up for people here to see. It's about the same, it's just cleaner and I think just some language is a little bit different.
Yeah, let me find my
Thank
email.
you. Yeah. Okay. It's essentially that. Let's go.
Send it to me because I haven't gotten anything.
It might be still, I guess, in transit and email.
Junk mail. All right.
I'm not on the right now.
Want to join them?
Yeah, I think Fred's really fast.
I haven't gotten anything.
Do you know what slide number it is? From the presentation.
It is, the slide number is,
It's the one we prepared, not enough.
Oh,
yeah, it's 72 in the VDOT presentation. According to the package.
This is the one that we were with the preferred. This is the one that it's actually the slide that the county presented, and I put boxes over top of it with different conversions, and I redid the grouping based on what we had discussed to come up with a preferred scenario. So I don't know what would be different than what that you guys saw.
But there is a different one, and either I'll be able to bring it up, but that the slightly different one was presented to the Board of Supervisors as well.
Yeah, I don't know what's different because I haven't seen it.
We don't include the groupings. One of the pieces that was really clear to us from different meetings and different conversations is that the county is not interested in like using the triangle about as an interim measure. We don't want to, we know that the roundabout at Canterbury is really necessary to make that triangle about work. So we want to have, yeah, those pieces. So we want to make sure all of those pieces are coming together.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, like I said, it's, we're basically going to put together the study, but the, I think we were looking at, from discussions that we were looking at the stuff along Old Ivy Road, we were thinking would be something that would be more locally pursued, and we would focus primarily for smart scale applications on this, the ramp extensions and the 250 bypass or 250 improvements, not so much the old Ivy Road improvements.
I don't want to fully speak for the county, but my impression from our conversation with the board was that this would be pursued as a complete smart scale package. At least in the first attempt. The county doesn't have any funds to build.
That's fine. I mean, we were looking at it on what could be eligible and who could submit it, because it's probably gonna be really expensive if we look at it all.
Just to clarify, one of the reasons to divide them into project groupings is because there have been some discussions that the projects could be submitted as subgroups, as complete applications through the high priority program. So that would leave multiple smart scale projects that could be submitted as smaller subgroups. So it's not necessarily that the locality would be responsible for paying for the shared use path, but that could be a separate smart scale application from the other improvements that the MPO might be eligible for through HPP as either an interchange project or a pipeline developed study recommendation of that.
Now, the biggest concern is we're looking at is from a high priority standpoint. I don't know if they would let us do all of this stuff as a high priority project, because the bulk of it's going to be not eligible. So it may not be eligible for the county, for the MPO to submit the entire study improvements. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to change what it's going to be beyond what we've already talked about.
When that part a little bit more, I thought the purpose of the pipeline study was to develop a project that would be submitted. As
Correct. I'm hoping that they'll take the whole thing, but the ramp improvements are a really small portion of this study.
So, does that mean the rest of it is not qualified?
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what they're going to change with regards to the eligibility. And right now, they're, according to the eligibility, everything in all the recommendations from a pipeline study would be eligible. So the MPO could submit all of these, but I'm concerned that they may change that. And I don't want to put us in a situation where we can still pick and choose what we want to do, but I want to be able to still have the MPO be eligible to submit as much of this as we can. But I didn't necessarily want to kill the project by making it too expensive.
Well, I've got some more detailed questions and so the shared use path, so I'm still learning the whole funding component of this, but the actual shared use path part of this project is currently kind of dead ending into Old Garth Road. And is because it is the one lane of kind of that triangle going over the 250 bypass bridge, like allowing us now to use that bridge for bike ped. So it's not, Jessica's shaking her head, Chuck. So that means that we're gonna have to add an additional bike ped bridge like in previous designs?
Probably, yes.
Okay, so.
I mean, and that's why I said the shared use path is something that it's not something that's an easy solution. I think we've got the eastern end worked out. But I mean, we're not talking about a shared use path under the bridge. We're talking about a 6 to 8 foot separated area for bike and pedestrians to use. Getting it to qualify as a shared use path is going to be a stretch.
Because of the VDOT, we've gone back and forth. That's because of the VDOT standards, right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's just getting it under there. I want to make it safe, and it's just how much space we need to get that, how wide it can be to get in underneath that bridge, and still function as a one travel lane and a bike ped lane. And because they're going to have to be separated by some sort of method. And it's what that method is. I have to make it safe because I don't want a vehicle go down through there. If you just put delineators down, I don't think that's going to be enough of a protection for pedestrians and bicyclists to have them feel like it's comfortable to go through that underpass. There's no relief. You're basically talking about the side of the underpass and the travel lane on the other side. And you got to have some sort of barrier or something in there that's separating the vehicles from the bike and pedestrians.
Chuck, I was under the impression it was raised like a sidewalk. Is that not?
Correct. Correct. That's what I'm saying, but it's going to be raised, and it's just how much it's raised and what the separation is. Is it just going to be a 6-inch curb and sidewalk? I don't know. We haven't gotten to that level of design or detail yet.
I guess,
That would have to be something that would be fleshed out if this is moved forward as a final application.
yeah, so I have a comment. So, the left turn lane would be removed from Ivy Road in this,
The eastbound left turn lane.
correct.
Correct.
So would we then, the city, have to talk internally about if we wanted to remove the right turn lane going westbound, or which,
It's still two-way traffic. So the right turn lane would still go through. What we were talking about, if you can't maintain two-way traffic, that we would allow the westbound movement to be the dominant movement and move forward as a single lane
could you,
way to go. But I don't, like I said, that's a lot of that. We've got the analysis that shows right now that it works. But once we get to the point where we were ready to build it and have a funded application, we'll have to relook at it. But right now, the analysis that we have with the study shows that a two-way signalized application would work there from an operational standpoint, with or without that left turn lane. The left turn lane is very small volumes. We just felt that it would be more efficient, especially for the operations on Ivy Road, to actually take that left turn lane out.
could you, make that corridor, so underneath the railroad bridge, one way during certain times of the day and one way the opposite direction during other times, meaning in the afternoon, more people are going westbound on Ivy Road to hit 250. And therefore, can you just make it one way during that time frame?
Possibly. Like I said, it's all got to do with signage, and you don't want people coming down there and then they'll not be allowed to get, because then you got to turn them around somewhere. So we're going to have to make sure that we provide all the accommodations for whatever scenario we're going to come up with for that. Right now, we're looking at as a signalized two-way movement underneath that underpass. If we want to do something else by direction, we'll have to look at it. I mean, I know that we've heard a lot of conversations from the folks that have kids at STAB that go from the high school to the middle school, and use that corridor as opposed to going around. But a lot of people would have to weigh into it, decide which way. I think what we heard predominantly was the westbound movement was the movement that was preferred.
So, my final comment, and I'll stop talking after this, is, as some of you all know, we put 300 people on the road, biking and walking in this corridor a couple weeks ago, and they all did 20 miles, and this was the most dangerous part of the feedback I got was this is the most dangerous part of the entire experience, for them, and, adding some sort of facility here, I'm personally a huge fan of doing something sooner rather than later, because of the need of not just the people who we put 300 put down on the trail, and it's like thousands of people here can't access a grocery store without driving safely through through that underpass. So, walking and biking under here, I just want to reiterate how important I think this project, this part of the project is. But yeah, I guess we'll explore that in more detail later.
Any other questions or comments on this topic? All right, I think we're ready to move on to stars and pipeline studies.
All right, let me switch this out then. Hold on. Hard working out at just one monitor.
You'll need to start sharing your screen again.
I know, I've got to get back to the, all right, here we go. Share. All right. Hopefully this will go pretty quick. Stars and pipeline. Okay, we've already kicked off the stars process. We've already actually sent in the scopes, and we've got cost for the preliminary phase of those projects. Pipeline, we're just identifying the locations right now. So basically we already have this like I said, overview of the program. This is basically comparison of the two different programs. They're very similar. One of them is run by coordinated with TMPD, which is VDOT, and the other one's coordinated with OIPI, which is the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment that's run through the Secretary of Transportation's office. So they're a little different. Basically, the pipeline process came out of the STARS process. They just tweaked it a little bit when they wanted to set theirs up. But basically the purpose of them is there's a little bit of flexibility. Pipeline is mainly geared towards addressing the needs that are identified in VTrans and the highest priority needs that are identified in VTrans, which is our state highway plan. And that also is run by the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, where TMPD coordinates the other one. And this is basically has a lot more flexibility. The whole program started out as a STARS as a strategically targeted, affordable solutions to problems on a corridor. And that's where it came out of. We started with the first STAR study on the 53 corridor and the Route 20 corridor in Albemarle County. We're two of the first two STAR studies that were done in the state. And it's basically changed a little bit over time to where we can pretty much do just about any type of study with this program. But basically you have several different phases. STARS primarily has two phases. You have the scope phase where you sit down, have a look at what's going on out there, try to have a kickoff meeting with the localities and identify who your stakeholders working group is, and you develop a scope that's going to carry on in the second phase as the study. Where pipeline basically does that a little differently. They do a three-phase approach, where they basically do some of the preliminary stuff, similar to the phase one. You don't necessarily have a framework document that you've got to sign off on. You want to get agreement to the scope, but you're basically still nailing down what the scope is, but you're also getting some public feedback. And that's at the end of the kickoff of phase one and the beginning of phase two. The phase two is basically where you're doing your alternatives now development once you've gotten your public feedback and your input from your stakeholders. And then you go through that process to develop your preferred alternative scenario, and you reach out for the public feedback again on the various alternatives so you can get feedback and then decide on what the preferred alternative. And then step three is basically where you're finalizing your preferred alternative, concepts and developing your cost estimates that are submitted typically as applications for smart scale, but they don't necessarily have to be. Those second two phases in the STARS program are just combined. That's the biggest difference between. There is some more flexibility as to what type of projects you can do with STARS versus what you can do with pipeline. So basically we looked at our corridor, we got a list of locations that central office provided, as well as feedback from the various residencies across the district, and the traffic engineering and L&D. And we came up with these 4 locations. We reached out to the county and the city to get their feedback. And one of the big issues was we're starting to have a lot of issues with at exit 118. And there was a lot of concerns about how the left turns were being created. We're having queuing from the previous application that was built several years ago for the southbound left turn movements onto 250 or 64 East is queuing up. So we wanted to really look at that interchange. And we also wanted to look at the stuff north of 29 of the bypass, on the northern end of the bypass where you have the 29 interchange and Hydraulic Road, because those weren't really studied in Solutions 29. So we felt we needed to look at those because there's a lot of issues going on there, and all of the forecast and the analysis show that they're going to start to fail miserably in the future. So we wanted to get some sort of solutions for that portion of the corridor. And then the other portion is north of Hydraulic is the top safety locations in the district, both at Greenbrier and at Woodbrook. Those are number 1, and we also have the number 1 segments in the district. Number 1 through 1 and 2 and 3, I think, are right there in that corridor. So we want to look at that section. So we looked at doing those as 2 applications. And then we did the West Main Street. We wanted to look at something in the city to see if we could come up with a process that we could work with the city on doing some of these studies where we could get the process nailed down on how that would work for these type of studies in the city. And that's basically our 4 projects. Oh, 3 projects, right? The other one, the 4th project is up is not in this area. Any questions about those?
Well, you have me curious about the 4th project now. Which one is it?
The different land use there.
Okay, gotcha. Any other questions about these STAR studies?
So, what does it look like to look at the 29-250 interchange? I mean, earlier in the Ivy study, you're recommending 6 laning the bypass. Are you talking about like redoing the ramps to be longer to accommodate more lanes? Or is it fixing?
There's been a lot of stuff that's been looked at here over the years. I mean, I've looked at this interchange several times. I know with Places 29, we looked at converting it to a SPUI, which is basically a single point urban interchange where you had triple lefts on coming from the ramp. You basically remove the loop ramps and just have ramps coming straight in to one signal that's underneath the bridge. We haven't really gotten anything. Most of the other solutions that we came up with for this corridor in the past have been like some sort of flyover. Solutions 29, we didn't actually look at this interchange, so we don't have a solution for it. We didn't look at Hydraulic Road either. So we don't have we had some things that we've talked about, but they never really moved forward other than to have some high level discussions on. So we want to really focus on what we can do here. I think the 6 laning is not necessarily up through this point. Most of it is south of Barracks Road. Because you get all the people that are coming in from Georgetown to the interchange and then going southbound. So you're combining 2 major streams going southbound, at Barracks Road interchange, and then coming northbound, they basically they're splitting up. So between Barracks and the 250 or the 29 interchange, you don't really necessarily have to 6 lane that section. So that wouldn't be something we would be looking at.
Okay.
It's pretty much 6 lane now, almost anyway, especially westbound, because you've got the 2 travel lanes, plus you've got the connecting the ramp on and off ramps between the 2 interchanges. So it's typically 6 lane now. Or 3 lanes in the westbound direction and 2 lanes in eastbound direction.
Yep.
With a
And,
little space between the ramps on the eastbound side.
will this also include like looking at getting some sort of like ed facilities from south of 250 to north of 250? We've got the center median sidewalk right now, but connecting to the Hillsdale shared use path seems like a big missing gap in the network there. Like getting from Hillsdale to south of 250. And would that be in scope here?
I mean, we would still look at that. That was a recommendation out of the Solutions 29 and the hydraulic small area study was the Hillsdale extended, which basically extended that shared use path to the basically the connection along 250 didn't necessarily go across the bypass, but at least it extended it further to the south. We can talk about that as something that we might want to look at, how we get across there as part of this project. I mean, like I said, if you wanted to look at a flyover or something like that, then you could look at, well, if we did a flyover type of improvement here, how we could change the use of Emmett Street from south of Hydraulic Road. You may be able to look at a different total configuration difference because you don't necessarily, you're taking the through trips out of that segment of road. And so it may function totally different. There's a lot of options there, but let's look at all the options and explore the possibilities. And that's what this study I want to try to do. And we also want to look at that section south of 250 on Emmett Street from Barracks Road, because it's not been studied. And that does show up as a section that has a lot of safety needs.
So Rory, I mean, within these boundaries need to get changed to like or I mean, how much input do we need, or how much do we have to worry about actually drawing the boundaries to kind of maybe show what Rory was asking? And similar to that, I'd be interested to talk to the county about Hillsdale in general going north up to Route Road.
I mean, the other portion of it is going from Hydraulic Road to Woodbrook, which is just the first intersection north of Ryo Road. So we have 2 studies on the corridor. We're going to run them concurrently. Together, we have one consultant. Baker's going to do both of those studies. So I'm hoping that we can keep those together. Baker worked with us on the Solutions 29 project. They did the Fontaine project. I think they're working with the city on some of the stuff in the city south of Fifth Street, in the south portion of Fifth Street. So we're basically bringing them back to try to help us come up with solutions for this. Like I said, I know that when we did the Solutions 29, we looked at the hydraulic intersection. We didn't impose improvements to it other than that extension of the one left turn lane. But in the future, it starts to fail. And I think we're starting to experience some of that now. So we may want to look at something different configuration there so it will continue to work now and into the future. And as part of that, we may be able to look at how we can get pedestrians across at that location as opposed to just through the underpass where you're walking along the creek. But I mean, like I said, there's a lot of I don't want to start scoping the study out, but we're basically going to approach this with a blank slate.
I mean, I think maybe the question is like, how hard are these project boundary drawings? For example, on the North 29 part, does that scope include sort of the parallel road network, like Hillsdale on the east and Commonwealth on the west? Or is it specifically like 29 itself?
Specifically 29 itself, I mean, we're gonna have to look at some of it, especially if we look, depending on the alternatives for 29, because I don't want to get lost in the weeds. I want to focus on, because we've got a lot of issues on the corridor. I mean, serious safety issues where we have some intersections have like 70 crashes over a 5-year period, which is crazy. So we want to focus on how can we improve those locations and make the operations better safer for both pedestrians as well as vehicles. That's the primarily focus on the on the corridor study, but I don't want to discount the other modes of transportation. I want to make sure we're looking at how pedestrians are going to function and bicyclists in this corridor, how they can get across the corridor, how we can make it safe for them. Because if you have to cross 8 lanes of traffic walking, it's crazy at 2 foot per second. 180 seconds, that's going to kill your intersection. So we have to figure out how this is all going to happen. I don't know. But we're going to look at grade separations as well as at grade improvements, alternatives. So we're going to look at the whole gambit of things. And if it may be routing traffic a different way, that could be an option. I don't know, but we're looking at the parallel network to the extent that we are addressing the issues on the corridor, because that's the focus of this project.
Okay, so just maybe to summarize, of these 3 projects, the first one, the interchange is focused on level of service and future projections of it failing. The second is focused on safety, and the third is also focused on safety, or?
Well, I mean, they're all safety related, and operations. It's mostly safety is what's the main driver factor for most of these. For all modes, because I mean, there's issues at Ridge Street where there's been pedestrians getting killed there. So we got to figure out how to fix that intersection so that it works for everybody. I mean, saw bicyclists get T-boned there at the intersection. So I mean, I want to figure out how to solve that problem, but we need to develop a way to do it. So we can work with the city on what the solution is and the process we're going to go through to get to the solution. And that's what I want to work through. That's why we only picked the one intersection as opposed to a bigger corridor, because I want to set the ground rules for the process, and then we could look at other things. But these other intersections, these other corridors are in the city too, as well as the county. So we're going to have to work together on those, but those are this one's more of a city focused project. The other 2 are more of a regional significant project. So, we need to look at them in that regard.
Thanks.
All right, any other comments, questions on STARS pipeline studies coming up?
Well, I haven't gotten to the pipeline studies yet. This was just STARS. For pipeline, we were looking at these 2 corridors, which the Fifth Street corridor, we're looking at it from relooking at the DDI, as well as re-examining Fifth Street. That was a previous application that the MPO submitted or the TJPDC submitted in a previous round, but they weren't eligible to submit this round. So we're going to look at it in combination this round in pipeline, so that it could be something that the MPO could submit as a full improvement, as well as just submit the interchange as a standalone project. And then the other one was the 118 intersection, and we took it to the interchange at Fontaine because of whatever we do at 118. The distance between the 2 interchanges is really short. So some of these alternatives, I mean, we looked at a DDI originally, will impact the weave merge between those two interchanges. So we have to carry it all the way up through the interchange to actually make it work. Because we may have to do some additional improvements. One of the alternatives for the northbound merge weave was to expand the bridge and run a lane across the bridge. So it can merge further to the north and provide more distance for that merge to occur. So we may have to go back and look at some of that stuff. So that's why it's bigger. We're also going to look at a park and ride lot. There is a small one at Teal, but we're going to look at expand that and provide transit access to it so that it could be better utilized. So those are the two pipeline projects in this area that we were considering.
For the Fifth Street one, there was one that was completed in 2021 in January. That is essentially the same scope about, it just doesn't cover as far south on the county side. And it had the recommendations like the roundabout at Old Lynchburg and Fifth Street from the DDI and some recommendations for Harris Road. How would this pipeline be different from the one that was completed a few years ago?
But we're not going to look at south there, all that stuff, relook at the stuff south of the interchange. We're mainly looking at, is there something we can do differently at Fifth Street Station versus what we already proposed to, because it was submitted previously as a smart skill application, it wasn't funded. The city is looking at a different improvement for their portion of the corridor. So once you get to Fifth Street, I don't want to have something that's going to be different from what the city's doing. So I want to make sure that we're going to be carrying what they're going to be wanting to do through the intersection.
That would include the, I guess the bicycle. The road diet. The road diet, okay, so that's kind of looking at that, because I'm looking at the recommendations, and it says that Fifth Street will have a sidewalk shared use path, but I guess that's not planned, and you're gonna, instead of remove lanes, I guess you wanna look at it differently, and, just so that intersection differently.
Well, we applied for the charity path a couple years ago.
Yeah, and then right after this study that you're looking at in 21 was completed, we also did another alternatives analysis on Fifth Street for our section between Cherry and Paris Road. And the alternative we came up with for that didn't do so great in traffic analysis, so that was sort of put on the shelf, and now we're looking at a third alternative. It's just the road diet and the southbound side, and that doesn't match up with the 2021 plan. So now we have to look at, all right, how do we approach Fifth Street Station and Harris Road with our new alternative? Okay, yeah.
So it's just a matter of incorporating what they want to do through this intersection. So it all works together, because like I said, it won't work the way it's laid out right now if you have two different configurations.
Okay, and I guess we might be looking forward too early, but with respect to the DDI and also PEC having a study done between Old Lynchburg and Fifth Street for that greenway, would that project, the green one, would that be included? And additionally, for the DDI, if it's expected, or maybe like, there are thoughts that the design of it will actually change to be more of a separate shared use path bridge. Will that also be included, or how would you approach that with this pipeline?
And we're going to basically put the connection on that side of the interchange so that it can be incorporated in. I mean, it's just a matter of crossing the ramp versus, I mean, that's what we were going to look at doing before.
Okay, and then for the one, the pipeline up at the 118 and 29 interchange, that the 118 exit 64 is being studied right now for State Street Terrell by Community Horn. How is this project different from what they're doing? And are you gonna, and if it is, are you gonna work with them to come up with similar solutions, or is it separate from what the work that Community Horn is doing?
You're talking stuff that Baker did for Fontaine?
No, I'm talking about what's happening right now, the Safe Streets for All work that the TJPDC and then other, localities here are funding as part of Safe Streets for All with Community Horn.
I'm not sure what they're going to come up with, or if they're going to come up with anything for the interchange. I mean, they're showing it as a safety need, but I'm not sure what the project they're going to come out of that's going to be.
We we reached out to Kim Moore early in this process, we were talking about this to see if there was overlap, and one of the things that, they told us is that their analysis is not going to be as comprehensive as what would be included in the STAR study. So, I think there's room for coordination, but they encouraged us to go ahead and move forward with, requesting additional funding for this. They're mostly looking at the safety, not necessarily also the operational analysis piece of it. And so that's, an additional part of the puzzle that we need to make sure that we're, considering.
So I guess you're gonna be doing a more in-depth look at that interchange, well, I guess Safe Streets for All would be more of a safety operational look,
Just safety.
just safety, then is it worth, because I assume you would also look at safety from VDOT, would it worth it to have two groups look at the safety of the interchange?
Well, I mean, this is something we did discuss with them, and I think if they have recommendations, we would certainly pull that into the STAR study. I think part of the answer to that, Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, depends on what you all as the regional or local body want to do with that information once you move forward. Like, if you're moving forward to apply for an implementation grant, that might be a different conversation than if there's information that comes from that study that can be integrated into the STAR study. Do you have anything you want to add to that there, Chuck? I don't want to.
Listen, I don't know if what you guys are pursuing from a implementation grant. I know that they were working on identifying the locations that and prioritizing the locations of the safety locations across the region. And then you guys were going to focus on specific locations to develop further material for an application grant. But I'm not sure where we're at in that process.
Just to add a few topics on that, something that's something. I think we met with, we were in that meeting with someone from VDOT to identify locations. And I don't remember us using exits 118 and 18. So to your question, I don't think Kimley Horn is looking at the same thing as Chuck is looking at, from my understanding. Because in that meeting for the county, we came up with specific locations based on everybody's agreement. And I don't recall that language there. If we can close that.
So it was data from locations based on the high injury network. So in coordination with the jurisdictions, specific locations and that were identified based on that for the Move Safe Blue Ridge project.
But they're not looking at the same thing.
I don't want to contradict you, but I do think that we are looking at that same area. It just was referred to by a different name.
Yep.
And that meeting happened before we heard anything about the project pipeline stuff. We went on to the site visits before we heard about project pipeline. I think what Alberic is getting at, and one thing I'm really curious too, Sandy and Chuck, is how do I explain to my elected officials why we're doing two separate studies on the same area? And are we double paying for things? Like, what are the two separate things we're gonna get out of these two separate studies? How are they gonna coordinate? We've got two different sets of consultants. I just wanna make sure that, maybe we need to go back to Kimley Horn and say, hey, this better project pipeline study is coming along. We don't need you to do that, to look at it, and we wanna move our money to a different location. Or can you better explain to me how I explain to other people, these are different, they're gonna give us two different products, and both are valuable?
Yeah, check, my thought is that we might want to have this discussion, we might want to have a follow-up discussion, because I think this depends on how much of a priority this is as part of the Safe Streets and Roads for All project. Because the one benefit in keeping it on the Safe Streets and Roads for All list is that it also gives you the opportunity to apply for a different funding source for it. So it could be a discussion around, how do we coordinate the two? If Safe Streets and Roads for All is a priority, if this is a priority for Safe Streets and Roads for All, how do we make sure that we're also considering the additional operational analysis that we need to make sure is addressed as part of that? But I think this is probably a follow-up.
And I would doubt that we're the only region that's, doing a safety action plan and trying to wrestle with, okay, we're gonna have this list of recommendations from the safety action plan that don't line up as cleanly with smart scale as a pipeline. Is there some way that you can get VDOT to help us translate what we're getting out of our federal safety planning into a way to sort of have a pipeline, the smart scale feedback? I think a lot of our smart scale applications we would want to go after, will have a strong safety element. So basing our project priorities based off of that rather than necessarily always having to go after pipeline or stars would be helpful.
Oh, I mean, in the stars, we're getting to a certain point. Stars more so than pipeline. Pipeline, if you do phase 3, like Ivy Road, we're only going to get some high level stuff. If we want to submit an application, we're going to have to go down and do a lot more detailed sketches and cost estimate to come up with a application material. We'll have the analysis and stuff done as part of the pipeline study, but we won't necessarily have the final sketch or the final cost estimate because that'll have to be done separately.
I think we're wondering if the same thing is going to happen with Safe Streets, where we're going to have a lot of conceptual good ideas that we might want to develop further. And how do we make sure that we're not cutting off that opportunity by saying, all right, now we're focusing on this new plan.
I think that's the conversation that I'm not going to be Sandy, in case I'm still here. When we were meeting, then I was attending some of those meetings, the idea from what I took away was identifying these different locations that would serve later for smart scale applications, or could be openings for future funding of some sort.
Yeah, and that really is a good point, because, as long as this is a location that is identified in the Safe Streets and Roads for All plan, I think we could probably, read the program guidelines, I'm certainly not the expert, but it could be that you develop the solution or more detailed analysis through STARS, and then that's still eligible for an application through Safe Streets and Roads for All.
So we're just framing this as this is the next step in that funding opportunity
But
for smart scale.
we also have to look at this.
The timing is what I'm concerned about, right? What would be awesome is if the Safe Streets thing happened first and then that fed into the project pipeline process. What I really don't want to happen is to have dueling solutions.
Sure, yeah, understood.
So I appreciate you suggesting we have a follow-up conversation. I would love to schedule that, Sandy, and Chuck, we will talk further.
We can do that, Jessica. I mean, the biggest thing is we're trying to get started on this early enough so that we can get material together for a smart scale application. And that's why this is one of the locations that it's a significant need that we want to figure out how to solve. And it is an interchange. It's going to require an IAR. So it's a lot more in-depth type of analysis and study that we have to do for this interchange versus an intersection on another corridor. So I just want to make sure we're giving it enough time and effort to get something good in the end. I mean, this interchange has been submitted several times. The first time we submitted in round 1 of Smart Scale was $175 million interchange project. And that project today would cost probably several $100 million. And I want to make sure that we're going to get something. We ended up breaking it into pieces and submitting it as several small pieces to actually get the improvements that we have out there now. And we're starting to see those start to not function as well as we would like. So we're going to have to go back and look at something else. And that's what we're trying to do here. And we also want to look at that park and ride lot. And that's a key thing because there's a small park and ride lot there and it doesn't really have transit access. If we can provide something there that's going to have a significant facility that does have transit access, I think it would be beneficial both for the city and the county. Because you could bring people, they could come in on 64 and park there and then take transit in. And I think that significantly will reduce the traffic going in and out of the city. I mean, it's not going to be 100 spaces, or it might be 100 spaces. We'll just have to see what we can fit on that area, but it definitely a step in the right direction to try to keep people off the roads. I mean, we do have the transit lines on the corridor, and this would be a good place to start to focus on a plan where we're using the interstate as a transit rail line, so to speak, to get people to and from the city from the outside of the area.
Right.
But like I said, and currently there's no way you're gonna put any kind of pedestrian or bicycle facility through that interchange. You'd have to look at an alternative, which I don't know where that would be, but that could be something we could consider too.
All right, well, I'm gonna keep us moving along here, Chuck. Thank you for the information. We've got about 15 minutes left in our schedule, so I'm gonna move on to our next topic. If anybody has any questions on this, please follow up with Chuck and Sandy. I'm sure we're gonna hear much more about those in coming meetings. Corian, do you have some SS4A updates for us?
Yes, so during the month of September, we conducted 6 site visits for Move Safely Blue Ridge. 2 from which were in the city of Charleston and Albemarle County. We did visit multiple locations within those counties. As I said earlier, those locations were identified based on the Heinz network. So I think that the data from Move Safely Blue Ridge and Smart Scale kind of needs to work cohesively. The main goal of both projects per se is obviously 0 injuries and fatalities, if safety is priority. The next thing that we will focus on Move Safely Blue Ridge will be the public engagement for round 2, in which we will ask for feedback on the potential solutions for based on the site visits and issues that were identified. That's gonna come in November, and I think by December we should be reaching back to the jurisdictions to discuss that feedback. Oh, yes, thank you, Sarah. We have a working group member meeting this coming Thursday. It is gonna be our 5th working group member meeting, and it is from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
I saw something recently that we're gonna be doing a charrette sometime in November, December timeframe in the city of Charlottesville as part of that public engagement.
Yes, I believe Daniel McCray might have reached out to you to ask for some information on it, but let us know how we can support you.
Yep. Any questions on Move Safely Blue Ridge, Safe Streets for All?
So meeting on Thursday open to the public. Just here.
It's gonna be virtual,
Okay,
but yeah, would you like a link to it?
sure, you can send it down.
Okay, next update.
The next update is the December MPO Technical Committee meeting is gonna be on December 10th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Any other updates for him?
That's it. All right.
Thank you. We've got roundtable updates. I will go ahead and kick us off with the city of Charlottesville. Had a couple busy weeks recently. Part of Safe Streets for All and Safely Blue Ridge, the city council set their commitment back in May to reducing serious injuries and deaths. We looked at setting a target of eliminating deaths on our streets in Charlottesville by 2045. About 2 weeks ago, we did not make that target. We had a death on Elliott Street, someone trying to cross the road at First Street South in a crosswalk. So very visible area, seemed very avoidable, and very quickly we realized we needed to do something about it. That includes, continuing our work with Safe Streets for All grant, doing that planning, but also we're waiting to hear back on a grant for supplementing that planning so that we can do some traffic calming. That would look at calming things on some of our local streets. LA is obviously an arterial, so not in that category, but it's made us realize we need to have some conversations internally to make sure that we can get traffic calming devices out on our streets. That includes talking with some of our different departments that have large vehicles, so transit, fire department, the garbage pickup, school bus, making sure that the things that we're putting out on the streets aren't going to hinder their operations, but that they also can help us identify what we can put out on the streets. So I've got some conversations this week looking at those. We also realize that we have some issues with what we've said are our design speeds for traffic in our city and what we actually have as speed limits. They don't really match. So we are, as my boss, the deputy director, or deputy city manager of operations, announced at our city council meeting last week, we are going to be looking at a pretty comprehensive review of our speed limits in the city, looking at lowering in a lot of places. We also understand that's going to require us putting some traffic calming stuff on the ground to make sure people are actually following those speed limits and they're not just relying on our police department to enforce them. So those are two big things that have come out of that horrible event a couple weeks ago. It seems like it's a lot of planning things that we're doing and maybe not necessarily a lot of action. I do want to acknowledge some of the things that we're currently working on and trying to get done. Tommy is trying to design some sidewalks right now, and he's just about done, and we're about ready to hand those off to Public Works. That means he gets to jump from looking at sidewalks to looking at West Main Street and figuring out how we can put some protected bike lanes on West Main Street. So that's something we'll be scoping this fall. Right now, we are also working on Fifth Street with VDOT. They have finished their first round of looking at the traffic analysis for doing a road diet on the southbound lane of Fifth Street. That would allow us to put in a bikeway in that southbound lane. The initial traffic analysis says in the short term, we should be okay doing that. Should be fairly minimal impacts. The biggest impacts would be if you're on one of those side streets, it might take a few seconds longer to turn on to Fifth Street. The problem comes when you look at the long-term impacts. The intersections at Fifth Street Station and at Harris Road end up failing because there's a reduction in capacity, and we know that there's a lot of problems at Fifth Street Station. So that was part of the discussion that we had with VDOT about what their pipeline projects would be, where, hey, we're about to potentially do this thing that looks great for us in the short term, but looks like it'll be a big problem in the long term, and the problem is right here at this intersection. So we're excited to work with VDOT on that, redefining what that intersection will look like, because it is definitely a problematic one for us at the city. We're also working on Safe Routes to School. Safe Routes to School has done a lot of paint and plastics sort of stuff over the few years. This year we are partnering some of those things. We just put down a new sidewalk on Azalea Drive and a new cat and school bus stop there. So we're getting a few of those improvements out over the fall. In the meantime, we're also looking at our school bike fleets. Most of our city schools have some amount of bikes they use for PE programming. We're looking at expanding those so that they won't show up to school and see if there's a few broken bikes that they won't be able to use in class. We're also looking at expanding them so that we can use them for after school programming and other parks programming in the future. So we're looking at what does that look like? What does it take to sort of have an asset management plan for the bikes that our kids are using every day? But the other thing about bikes that I want to mention is we are working on rolling out e-bike subsidies sometime in the next month. We'll be publicly announcing that when the sign up would happen with that. We are looking at a lottery system. So we'll have a several weeks to a month period of letting people sign up for this lottery system. And then we'll pick a lottery and hand out some vouchers to people. We're looking at a voucher program as well, not a rebate program. So we're basically handing people a coupon and saying, go buy a bike that's slightly cheaper on the city. So we're working on that right now, as well as looking at some things internally for how we promote bikes for city employees, both for our own private use and for our use while we're at the office, trying to get between things like City Hall and the city yard. So a lot of fun work on that. And lastly, I will mention that we are working on improving transit in the region, working with the county on setting up a regional transit authority. We had a presentation about a month ago that was between the joint session of City Council and Board of Supervisors, where we shared sort of the next steps for setting up a regional transit authority. Everybody at the table seemed to be pretty much in agreement that that sounded like a good idea. So right now we are working to develop the resolutions or ordinances that will be necessary to have both of those entities vote to set up the regional transit authority. And then our next step is figuring out what the regional transit authority is gonna do first. That's gonna be looking at sort of the grants that are gonna be available this January and February through DRPT and through some of our other federal and state partners. And seeing if there are opportunities for us to start moving quickly with getting some improvements to transit in the region. So that's all the fun stuff that we're involved in. We're working pretty hard to make sure that things are safer on our streets and trying to desperately catch up. I mean, Rory, anybody have any additions to that? You've had a few events recently.
Yeah, we put over 300 people, or we got 300 plus people to bike and walk during Loop-to-Bill, which is pretty cool. We had a monthly walk this past Sunday, through the Venable neighborhood. Next two ones we have in November, December is Clinton Page neighborhood and the Lewis Mountain neighborhood. So both of those are picked because they kind of surround UVA. And so we're reaching out to some of the students there and trying to get some cross pollination between the long-term residents and the short-term residents of those neighborhoods. I'll let you maybe talk about the webinar thing with CAA. Okay.
Rory, anything else from you?
I don't have anything for my end. Do you have anything else for the city?
No, I think I'm good. Okay. All right, County?
I guess me, so the webinar for CAA, that's kind of a follow-up to the walk audit meeting that we had in June. That was a grant where the CAA brought America Walks into the walk audit. We're gonna be doing some panels and discussions virtually from the next few months. So I think the first one is on the 6th, panelist. The 30th, yes, the second one first. But that'll be discussions about ways to improve infrastructure, talk about equities. That'll be exciting to look forward to and do that. Other county updates, want to go rewatch anything?
No, the only thing I'll add for those CA webinars is that those are really open to anyone, so we'll make sure to share the info with you guys if you don't already have it. You can spread it. I wanted to share that we are going to be finally kicking off the Free Bridge Lane Promenade pilot program. This is going to be a year-long pilot program to close Free Bridge Lane between Elk Drive, Dartmouth Park, and 250. Closed to motor vehicles, open to everybody else, open to enjoy, walk, run, bike, whatever. And we'll see how this year-long pilot program goes, and from there, hopefully we'll have enough interest to keep it going and make even more improvements to the roadway.
So what does success look like? How do we get this thing? Like,
Lots and lots of positive feedback.
okay, but you guys don't have like counters, you're not keeping.
We do have
You
counters.
do have
So the
counters?
counters out, Albert helped coordinate that. We had counters out for about the whole month of
I
August.
think for all of August, yeah.
So that was our intervention data, and we'll get this thing going a little bit. We'll wait for some nicer weather, and then we'll get the counters out again.
Got it.
What does failure look like?
Lots of angry people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the date, Jessica? Do you have a
We
date?
don't have a date for sure, but we're looking very soon. Information should go out by the end of this week. Yeah, with specific info. There will be like a kickoff event, we're gonna have a gate closing event. Again, that info will be solidified and sent out via Admiral County News, in the next couple of
I'm
days.
supposed to be helping with that, and that's why I'd like to know when the date.
I can quietly tell you later, but the official word will come out soon. Yeah, 3-Notch Trail, we are very close to announcing which consultant we are working with, but the notice of intent to award has not gone out yet, so I cannot say more.
All right. Roger.
I'll try to keep this brief so we can get everybody in. Should be getting a draft of the CAP strategic plan, hopefully sometime this month. So then we'll take, a deep dive into reviewing that. And I'm sure we'll have it out for folks to review as well before it goes to the commission for final approval. We also are participating in a statewide initiative through the month of October
for new commuters to enroll in the Connecting VA, also the rideshare app. Any new folks who register and log trips will get entered into a special drawing, so it's fall into a new commute. In addition, all of the regular drawings and rewards programs for current users are all still there, but we are trying to draw some attention and get some new folks involved in that. And that is a bigger part of the Connecting Communities statewide campaign as well. So.
Awesome. VDOT, do you have any other updates, Cindy?
I do not.
Okay. DRPT, do you have any updates or, we dropped off, right?
Yeah, so the RPD, Mitch Huber sent me some updates. I'm gonna read them real quick. The DRPT connects communities initiatives aimed to enhance, promote the benefits of local transit agencies across Virginia. The campaign is focused on increasing awareness and usage of public transportation options, highlighting their role in creating connected and thriving communities. Some of the key messages are enhancing connectivity, economic benefits, accessibility, and sustainability. There's also a partner toolkit available with customizable ads. The RPT hosted a transit service delivery advisory committee meeting on Tuesday, October 8th at 10 a.m. There's a link in the update to the contact if anybody needs more information from that. FY26 grant application workshop. The RPD will host the annual grant application workshop on November 13th at 11 a.m. Additional details and registration will be released closer to the event. TDP TSP agency feedback survey. DRPT is engaging in all our transit agencies on their most recent TDP TSP development process. From the collaboration of the usefulness of individual chapters, the RPT is seeking to enhance our planning requirements for our agencies. To take the survey, you can follow the link here, which is through SurveyMonkey. So I'll make that available to you.
Thank you. I haven't seen anybody from FHWA or FTA here. Kat, the only update I have is that we are going to be updating our schedules in the beginning of November, so keep an eye out for that. And also, I think we'll be wrapping up the zero emission transition plan sometime in November, maybe early December, so that is on the horizon as well. John, don't have any. John?
Yes.
Yes, Jason.
Did you guys roll out a nice dashboard?
We did.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Worth noting, it's good. I've talked about these a lot in previous meetings, but there's 3 studies we've been working on. We're finally getting a chance to roll some of them out. Rural Transit Needs Assessment was rolled out to our board and then to our stakeholders. We're going to present today at RTAC this afternoon. A lot of you probably are on multiple of those meetings, so you're going to have to see this presentation a lot. But so it's going to be brief today. It's going to be the board level presentation for the Rural Transit Needs Assessment. The mobility on demand / microtransit study we've been working on is also getting ready, almost ready to be rolled out. We're hoping December for the RTP, perhaps.
December 12th.
December 12th, that's the goal. And that one, I think, is going to generate some good conversation just about that technology and how we can use it and what it can do for us in our region and other areas. So I know that, CAT is MicroCat working on their success. And so that along with this might have some good conversations here with this group or with the RTP. And then lastly, there's a bus electrification fleet study that's also in its final phases of being wrapped up. And that'll probably be rolled out in early calendar year 2025. We'll also prompt some interesting conversations about how it applies to jaunt versus if you're doing rural transit, we have literally long routes over hilly areas. So yeah, we've had a big reality check with some of the bus electrification study findings for our service. Cool. That's it for me. John.
All right, thank you. Bill, do you have any updates from you yet?
not a whole lot, I mean, ongoing construction, you know, impacts, corridor, as well as Fontaine. We also have a, we need to take Leonard Sanders Road, there's some new access drive to the center of politics going in. And there's a small expansion of that facility. Previously, you belonged to that, Road, so to be able to close off that entry to vehicles that a small step in reducing traffic. Beyond that.
All right, well, thank you. All right, matters from the public. One more time.
So I'll try to speak a little bit more loudly this time. Regarding the mention of Free Bridge Lane, I remember back in the old days when that would have been federally functionally classified as a minor arterial, because everybody from Route 20 going south used to use Free Bridge Lane as an access to 250. And so the county ultimately took care of that, put in some blockades and stuff. But that is what I would call an inappropriate use of a local road when it was being used as a minor arterial. And that is sort of my beef with the federal functional classification. So it seems to be more of a quantification as opposed to looking at things from a quality standpoint and a planning standpoint about how do we make the city of Charlottesville and surrounding areas a place worth caring about, a good place to live. And so, and that's, back in, maybe this classification has gone away, but back in 1989, the Commonwealth Transportation Board defined residential cut-through traffic as traffic passing through a residential area without stopping or with at least one trip ending in that area. It's traffic that would be better served by the local street system intended for through traffic, but which for various reasons uses residential street traffic. And we have this situation occasionally where, trains pull across Carlton Avenue and all the or not all the traffic, a great deal of the traffic from that arterial is fed through the neighborhood, and an inappropriate use of local streets. I know you guys have been talking about this reclassification since May. Stakeholders were alerted in June, but I guess neighborhoods aren't stakeholders. But I would encourage you, as part of the public process, to educate people. And I'm now getting more educating and seeing that maybe the new reclassification to minor collector is not such a bad idea, but just need to get more information out there so people know about this program. It just totally caught us unawares. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And I think that's all we have on our agenda. You're good. All right. I guess with that, we can adjourn. Thank you, everyone.